Hello everyone, I am Dr. Rajiv Sutradhar. I teach economics at the Department of Economics, Northeastern Hill University, Shillong campus. Today I'm going to discuss about the foreign repercussion. If you recall, in our previous class, we talked about foreign trade multiplier, right? And foreign trade multiplier, if you guys recall, it is nothing but uh, it's a concept that can be traced back to the philosophy of mercantilist policy. That means we need to augment our export and limit our import because, in a sense, export is something which has a virtuous cycle of enriching our people. Then they spend, and then they have uh, then it worked in a way just like the Keynesian multiplier. Then some people's expenditure become other people's income, and then this goes on and it creates a virtuous cycle. And as opposed to that, import is basically is a leakage. Okay, if you spend your money on goods and services imported from other countries, then that income leaks out to the other countries, and it operates like an export does for our economy in those countries, not ours. In a sense, it displaces our domestic production, and it operates in an exactly opposite way like an export does, and people lose. People cut down production, then some people lose probably job, then income, and then similarly it works in a vicious way of making a lot of people lose their income, okay, and expenditure, okay. And but then this concept was based on certain assumptions, okay. And if you guys recall, the validity of a conception depends on how strong are these assumptions. If these strong assumptions are made while discussing certain concept, that means that that concept has limited applicability. And so, and we generally tend to basically relax those assumptions and see what happens, okay. And if you guys recall, one of the key assumptions that we made last time was that nation is a small nation, okay, and whatever it does in terms of basically export and import doesn't affect the other countries in a big way, okay. So basically, it's an insignificant player in the international economy. So and it operates only basically the export and import. It affect only the country of our interest, and it doesn't affect the other countries. Okay, it is in a sense. I mean, it's like a kind of assumptions that we make when we discuss about perfect competition, right? There are too many buyers, too many sellers, and one individual actors basically action do not affect the order, okay, world order, okay, or market order. Similar kind of assumptions that we make when we discuss about like foreign trade multiplier. But then this may not be basically, in a sense, you can say, like to discuss, in a sense, that may not be a realistic assumption, okay. A country's export or import, generally, if we are a small country, that might be possible that you are a insignificant player, and then your export and import doesn't affect the other countries. But if a country's export or import affect the national income of other countries, then basically it also in turn affect the foreign trade and national income of the first country, okay. That means you cannot just keep selling your goods and then you remain immune to the what happens to other countries, okay. It cannot be like continuous benefit for you, okay. So what happens to other countries then gets back to you, and in a positive way, or it may be negative way, right. If you keep selling your goods and services to other countries, right, then that country's trade is now, the composition is changing, and then probably their income is also getting reduced, and then they probably may not be able to buy goods and service from you. It's a simple concept, I mean. And so in that case, whatever we discuss in the foreign trade multiplier in a simplistic way may not hold much relevance, okay. And generally, if the country that we discuss is very small, so then whatever we discuss in the foreign trade multiplier concept earlier still remains valid. But if the country of our case study is very large, so then there might be basically a significant negative impact, and then it will basically we can't remain immune to basically the what happens in the other countries. Okay, so we'll discuss that in more. Basically, what I mean to say is that we're still living the assumption of two nation like world, nation one and nation two, and an autonomous increase in the export of nation one arises from energy is equal to autonomous increase in the imports of nation two. Basically, what I mean to say is that if uh, one country, if there are two country world, and if the first nation basically reports an increase in export, then that means that export is exactly equal to the import of nation two. Okay, and that means it replaces the national income of it replaces the domestic production of nation two, and then nation two will basically report fall in their income over time, and if their income falls, so then obviously their import also will fall, because the import of a nation is always a function of or dependent on their income. And once their income started falling, so then they will start reporting less import, and their import means that nation one is export, and then nation one's export also will suffer. Okay, and then so this basically what I mean to say is that initially what you see as a kind of a bonanza for you in terms of increasing export, then that if that leads to a decline in income, that's the second country, then that country will generally over a period of time report uh, decrease in their income, and then that leads to decrease in their import, and which also has a negative effect on our export. Okay, so in a sense, if we now allow for this or relax the assumption of this small lesson case study of a small nation with no effect on the world order, that means that the country of our study is big enough, then foreign trade multiplier effect is basically is less. Okay, so and then our trade balance also won't improve much. Okay, so in a sense, if we do not have any case of foreign repercussion, so then increase in export will immediately lead to improve in trade balance, and we are all happy like with that scenario. But if we have a strong presence of foreign repercussion, that means our export will have a negative effect on that country to which we basically export, and then basically once their income gets reduced, then they will import less from us, and then basically our export earning also will decline, and then trade balance that we basically get to see in a case of country without foreign repercussion, that will be basically less now. Okay, and we can also show this numerically. Okay, if you remember, our earlier example of foreign trade multiplier was basically 1 by a leakage. Okay, 1 by total leakages. Okay, and that is a basically extension of Keynesian multiplier. Okay, earlier it is, if you recall, the Keynesian multiplier was 1 by MPS, marginal propensity to save, and once we bring the import component, then 1 by MPS plus MPM. Okay, marginal propensity to import. So that means we have now two leakages. Okay, and so then that is then foreign trade multiplier is kind of less than the closed economy multiplier. Okay, because now we have two leakages introduced, right? And we have now like once we have a case of foreign repercussion, so then we just augment that formula, and we bring what happens to the country two. Because if you remember, earlier in a simplistic scenario, the foreign trade multiplier involves the leakage of nation one only, MPS one and MPM one. Okay, only the leakages of nation one is basically is concerned. Okay, as far as foreign trade multiplier is concerned. Okay, but now that we cannot assume away the effect of what happens in the other country with which we have basically export relation, right? So then we have to basically bring the leakages of that country only also into the formula, and that is exactly what we are doing. Okay, we are now bringing marginal propensity to import of nation 2, and marginal propensity to save of nation 2. Okay, and what is the new formula is basically 1 by the multiplier is basically change in income due to change in the export of nation 1 is equal to the 1 by MPS1 plus MPM1 plus MPM2 marginal propensity to import of nation 2 into MPS1 by MPS2, okay, with repercussion. Basically, this is a case of with foreign trade repercussion, where the subscript 1 and 2 refer respectively to nation 1 and nation 2, okay. And this compares with the simplified without foreign repercussion. We have only 1 by MPS plus MPM, both of nation 1. But now, since nation 2, what happened nation 2 actually matters. So we are bringing MP2 and MPS, okay, and we are making it interact with MPS 1, okay. And this is what the new revised formula in the presence of foreign repercussion. Okay, let us see now numerically what happens. Okay, if you remember, MPS 1 is equal to 0.25. Okay, marginal propensity to save of nation 1 is 0.25. That means out of 100 rupees, they spend 25. They basically save 25 rupees. And marginal propensity to import is 0.15. Basically, it means that out of 100 rupees, they spend 15 rupees on goods and services of foreign country. So their savings 25 rupees and import 15 rupees taken together is 40 rupees. Okay, is a leakage. Okay, and earlier we used to estimate this by 1 by 0.4, right, which gives us 2.5. Okay, I'll come to that later. So basically now we are now introducing marginal propensity to save of nation 2, which is 0.2, and then marginal propensity to import of nation 2, which is 0.10, right? And now this foreign trade multiplier will be is in 1 by 0.25 plus 0.15, which is of nation 1 only. One is MPS and one is marginal propensity to import. And then we are now introducing marginal propensity to save of nation, marginal propensity to import of nation 2, which is 0.10. Then into basically marginal propensity to save of nation 1, 0.25, and then marginal propensity to save of nation 2, which is 0.20, and which gives us basically 1 by 0.525, and which gives us 1.90. So basically we have now my multiplier which is 1.190, which is lesser than you can say without repercussion, which is below 1 by 0.25 plus 0.15 is equal to 2.5. Basically, we are in the new revised formula of foreign trade multiplier in the presence of repercussion. We are plugging in the terms, the concept of these leakages of nation 2. Okay, so what we have is now 1 by a bigger number, and that's why we have a reduced foreign trade multiplier. Okay, so now just see if there is an autonomous increase of 200 rupees in the export of nation 1, right, that leads to an increase in the equilibrium national income of nation 1. Earlier and now is 200 into the foreign trade multiplier 1.90, which is 380. Okay, so what I am trying to say is that with foreign trade multiplier in the context of foreign repercussions, we have a less increase in the national income, okay, compared to earlier scenario where basically we have 200 into 2.5 is equal to 500 without foreign repercussion. Okay, so basically what I mean to say is that the foreign trade repercussion effect refers to a situation in which a change in country's macroeconomic variable relative to another country will induce a chain reaction in both of their economies. Okay, and when the country's economy improved rises, and that means export of the first other countries also rise and their GDP increase. So in a sense, here by doing away with the assumption of the like small country case, we are introducing a more kind of a more dynamic element, right? We are allowing what we do in terms of like our trade balance, right? If we improve our like trade balance by raising the export, so then it is going to basically affect the other countries. And we till sometime back, when we only discuss about the foreign trade multiplier without foreign repercussion, what happened to other countries are not basically coming back to us. We are too small to basically really cause a very big changes in the other countries' trade. And then that countries basically, you can say, whatever they do, they are not going to get back to us. Okay, we can keep endlessly probably increasing our export without hoping for any negative repercussion of that export to the second country. Okay, because I mean they are too big. Okay, but now we are doing away with that, and then that means we are now dealing with a more complex scenario. Okay, so if our country is basically very small, so even if we raise our export like anything, then that is not going to affect the other country. Okay, but now we are basically dealing with a complex scenario. We allow that country's income to changes, and then its effect to be transferred to our countries. So then if we're a small country, if we're a small country, but then that is a big country, and probably our export is totally dependent on their what they import from us. So then any change in those income of that second country is going to affect our GDP in a big way. Okay, so in a sense, this policy implication of foreign repercussion is really matters. Okay, because now in a sense we are not exactly dealing with a situation where we can really prosper our way only by like raising our export like anything. Okay, and this is something that we also like get to see in now the trade negotiation in like involving multiple countries, right? So whenever the foreign leaders come, they kind of try to basically capture the market, negotiate, okay, to enhance their benefit. Okay, and that is now that you can just simply keep enhancing your export and while controlling the import is not going to happen in a smooth way. I mean, if you see even now recent international repercussions, like in terms of elections in US and all, here like Trump is talking about no, raising the tariff barrier, right, and enhancing and they are not going to be opening the market for the other countries, right, and they need to protect their jobs. So because whatever like other countries does, that has an effect on US, and this also is playing out in many other countries, right? Like if you look at like make in India, like we need to enhance our export, okay, somehow in any way, like no, I mean, but then this has a repercussions, and now there is also a threat of US raising their tariff vis-a-vis India to protect their market. Okay, so basically what I mean is that if the country is small, then it will be affected by change in income of other countries that will alter the demand for its exports. Okay, but it will not be able to transmit its own income disturbances to the latter. So what I mean to say is that if the country of our case study is very small, so then it's not whatever happens within that country doesn't matter to other countries. Okay, so you can visualize an example of a country like say, Sri Lanka, right? Sri Lanka is still probably struggling, or maybe if something happens to Bangladesh, it is not going to affect its big neighbor like say probably India or probably many other countries in the world. But then if a country is large, so then what happens within that economy, like its income disturbances, then it is really going to affect the other countries as well. Okay, so if there's a slum that is happening in that country, then it's going to affect the other countries, and that channel of operation is going to be, you can say, is going to be through the trade. Okay, so basically what it means, and this is something that if you go back and look at the history, you can see how this plays out. Okay, and how, and then once we introduce the concept of foreign repercussion, so then it is kind of a more dynamic scenario, and we allow basically uh, this the vicious cycle to basically to become more contagious. Okay, and this exactly happened in 1930s during the era of Great Depression, and also during 2008. So what happened during this the era of Great Depression is that once we introduce the like because it's a more very free international trade order during this 1930s. We do not have like very high tariff across countries, right? And then the slowdown started in US. Okay, and then it once it US reported like fall in income up to say 25-30%, right? And then it basically spread like a wildfire to the other countries. Okay, and this is exactly also we see in the context of 2008 global financial crisis. Here again, the epicenter of this crisis in it was in the US, but then probably US was very badly affected, but some other countries probably are even more, I mean, badly affected, especially small countries which are heavily dependent on US. Okay, so in a sense, what I mean to say is that, but then it is you cannot visualize this in another in the opposite way. Okay, if say Sri Lankan economy is really struggling for last couple of years, but then other countries are not so heavily dependent on basically Sri Lanka, and so it remains immune to this whole concept. So what I mean to say is that foreign repercussion is something which is once we introduce or add to the concept of foreign trade multiplier. So then foreign trade has like it's not so, you can say, the smooth road to prosperity. Okay, it has its own limitations in terms of effect that it have on the economy. Okay, so what I mean to say is that finally you may visualize a scenario where you want to improve your BOP, like deficit, or you can in fact want to report a surplus, but then it is easier said than done. Okay, so probably what you can think of doing is that probably we need to take care of our domestic economy in a better way. Probably if there's a slumpness in our economy or lack of demand in an economy, probably you can rely on so boom within the domestic economy, right? You probably give more purchasing power to the people within the economy, and then they spend without really relying on the other countries. Okay, and then so then you have a multiplying effect which is stronger than the foreign trade multiplier, especially if foreign trade multiplier is, to begin with, is, if you remember, it is 1 by MPS plus MP MPM. Okay, there's another leakage already added, and so this is anyway is less than the Keynesian multiplier. But then if you have introduced the concept of the foreign repercussion, so then you are basically playing with a more dynamic scenario with more vulnerability added to that, because now you are basically dependent on what is happening in the other countries to which you are exporting. Okay, and then you are basically plugging in those leakages of the other country into that equation, and you have a even lesser foreign trade multiplier. Okay, so basically the policy insight from our concept is that we have a more less optimism coming with foreign trade multiplier. Okay, and in fact this is how basically you can say is also this is something that is also realized by many countries. Many countries, like even in fact the China has also realized that China is, you can say, the hub of global manufacturing. Okay, they used to export to almost all countries, in fact disrupting their productions, right? But then when this 2008 financial crisis happened, they also found themselves in a very weak footing, because now US is in crisis and China is to export like is the biggest trading partner of US. Okay, and now that US is in crisis, that China cannot remain immune to that, and this is something that China realized. And then after once China started experiencing slowdown, like beginning of 2010, 11, right? What they did is that they tried to basically boost the consumption within the domestic economy. Okay, and they basically raised this their domestic consumption by raising the wages. So in a sense, like minimum wages, and so that, and that's almost like a 250% increase in the wages within like very short time, and there's a consumption boom taking place within the economy. Okay, and China also in the time spent huge amount of money in the infrastructure boom, and a lot of that translated into high consumption. Right, it's kind of an Keynesian autonomous investment by the government. Okay, so and this is something now is being increasingly realized by many countries, and try to boost their like consumption through other policy interventions. Okay, basically this mercantilism, what you see is in the world order, as noted by someone like there's one Harvard economist, I am not able to recall now, Tony Roderick. Okay, what we see is an increasing mercantilist order. Every countries want to put restriction on the other countries, and they try to export more, and that's kind of it's a very volatile scenario. Okay, and this is something that you are not able to see it only through a simplistic concept of foreign trade. So once we bring the idea of this more dynamic foreign trade scenario through foreign repercussion, so then probably there is more lessons to be learned. Okay, so of course when we have a struggling economy, export can be treated as a foreign trade can be treated as a way out to deal with the crisis, but then it is always less effective than fiscal instrument that we can envisage within the economy. Okay, basically relying too much on other countries export to boost your economy has its own vulnerability, and this is something now in being increasingly realized by other countries. Something like the Bangladesh also has has like many people are complaining about, like they are too much reliant on export of garments. Okay, and that is also making them more vulnerable. So there are a lot of people are saying that you need to also diversify and probably boost your domestic economy, right, and that will be a safer option. Okay, so with this I think I can close this.